Most people in North Ridge passed the old man without a second glance. Every morning, just after sunrise, he appeared like clockwork at the small park tucked between the academy grounds and the quiet residential streets. His steps were slow, measured, each one supported by a thick wooden cane scarred from years of use, much like the man who held it. Retired Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant Elias Iron Jack. Harrow looked like a relic misplaced in time. His posture was still straight as a rifle barrel, but age had drawn hard lines along his jaw and temples. His silver beard was trimmed with military precision, and his faded Marine Corps cap sat proudly atop his head like a crown he'd earned with blood. Children liked him. They approached without fear, offering breadcrumbs he pretended not to already have in his pockets. Dogs wandered to him as though drawn to something steady and grounded, but adults, especially those from the North Ridge Military Academy, viewed him with a blend of pity and discomfort. They knew he was a veteran, but not what kind of veteran. Rumors circulated Navy Cross 2 Purple Hearts Special Operations background, but no one knew the full story because Elias never spoke about himself. To the Academy cadets, especially the newer ones, he was simply the old ghost in the park. That particular week, the Academy was abuzz with preparations for its annual Founders Parade. Cadets marched in formation every afternoon, their shouts echoing across the grounds. Elias watched from the park bench as he always did, quietly observing, occasionally tilting his head in silent critique. And that was how the trouble began. One afternoon, Bravo Company marched past the park on their drill route. Elias watched, noting the sloppy left flank, the uneven cadence, the drifting of the second squad. When the formation turned, he couldn't help himself. "You're out of step," he called out. "You'd get eaten alive in a real unit marching like that." Cadets stumbled, startled. A few glanced toward him with annoyance, but none looked angrier than Cadet Captain Cole Maddox. Tall, well-groomed, and wearing his uniform like a trophy, Maddox was the Academy's pride. Intelligent, charismatic, born from a wealthy military family, he had never been corrected in public, certainly not by some old man on a park bench. He glared at Elias, his jaw twitching. "Mind your own business, old-timer," he snapped before marching on. Elias only shrugged, just trying to help. But humiliation burns hot and fast in young men desperate to prove themselves. That evening, Maddox gathered a small group of cadets. Boys who admired him, feared him, or simply didn't know how to say no. He spoke in low tones, his anger simmering beneath every word. "That fossil thinks he can disrespect Bravo Company. He needs to learn a lesson. Tonight." Some cadets hesitated. Others chuckled nervously, and in the dying light of sunset, 5 shadows slipped out of the barracks, heading toward the park where the old Marine sat feeding birds. Unaware that this night would awaken a fire he had kept buried for far too long, the park transformed as dusk settled over North Ridge. What had been a peaceful retreat of chirping birds and rustling leaves now felt heavier, quieter, like something was holding its breath. The massive oak trees, centuries old and wide as trucks, cast long shadows that stretched across the grass like dark fingers. Elias Harrow felt the change before he heard the footsteps. He sat beneath the largest oak, its trunk broad enough to hide a man twice his size. He had eaten his modest dinner, half a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, and fed the crumbs to the squirrels that had begun to trust him. The last light of sunset bled through the trees in streaks of orange and red. Then came the voices. Young, one easy. Trying to sound bold. Elias didn't look up immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes for a moment, sensing the vibrations in the earth, the weight of footsteps. 5 of them, tense and clumsy. Not the confident stride of men on patrol. No discipline, no purpose. Just boys drifting toward trouble they didn't understand. When he finally opened his eyes, the cadets stood before him. Cole Maddox at the front, shoulders stiff with pride. Behind him, cadets Larson and Briggs flanked him like loyal shadows, their faces tight with forced bravado. A step behind them stood the 2 youngest, Cadler and Ruiz, both pale, both shifting nervously as if wanting to leave but trapped in the orbit of Maddox's authority. Elias lifted his chin slightly. "Evening. Get up," Maddox ordered. The old Marine didn't move. "If you've come to apologize for earlier, you can do that with me sitting down just fine." Maddox's nostrils flared. He stepped closer, close enough that Elias could smell the Academy's harsh detergent on his pressed jacket. "You humiliated me in front of my company," Maddox said. "You don't get to do that." "I pointed out a mistake," Elias replied calmly. "A leader should appreciate correction, not fear it." Maddox scoffed. "You're not a leader. You're nothing." Larson laughed under his breath, but even he sounded unsure. Elias's eyes shifted, just for a moment, to the 2 younger boys. Their faces were filled with conflict. Fear of Maddox, guilt about what they were part of, and something else Elias recognized from long ago: shame. The same shame he had once felt when a reckless superior officer made choices that cost good men their lives. He sighed. "Boys, this isn't the path you want to walk. A brig stepped forward, trying to impress Maddox. "We're just teaching you some respect." "Respect," Elias repeated softly. "You don't even know the meaning of the word." The wind rustled the oak leaves above them, whispering through the branches like a warning. Something shifted in Maddox's pride to rage to desperation. His voice lowered, now trembling with humiliation. "You made me look weak." "I won't forget that." Elias's expression sharpened. "If this is about pride, walk away. Pride can be repaired. A bad decision cannot." And then the moment broke. With a sudden, reckless movement, Maddox reached inside his jacket and pulled out a handgun. A real one, heavy, cold, government property from the Academy's armory. The younger cadets gasped. Ruiz stepped backward. Cadler whispered, "Cole, don't." But Maddox wasn't listening. He raised the gun and pointed it directly at Elias's head. Cold steel met warm skin. Time froze. Even the wind stopped. Elias didn't flinch. He had felt the kiss of a barrel before. He had survived firefights more chaotic than anything these boys could imagine. But what struck him wasn't fear. It was sorrow. Sorrow that a young man in uniform, entrusted with discipline and honor, had turned a weapon not outward toward enemies, but inward toward his own people. "Do something," Maddox growled, voice cracking. "Kneel. Beg." The betrayal in the air was thick enough to choke on. And beneath the ancient oak, Elias realized that the past he had tried so hard to leave behind, the arrogance, the recklessness, the needless loss, was staring him in the face again. This time, though, he vowed it would end differently. The world slowed in that instant. Maddox's gun, trembling in his hand, reflected the fading light of the sunset, a pale promise of danger. The other cadets froze, their breaths caught in their throats, eyes wide, realizing too late how far they had crossed a line. Elias Harrow didn't flinch. His body remembered what his mind could no longer fully recall. Every drill, every ambush, every second when hesitation meant death. His left hand brushed the cane not for support but as a pivot. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, locked on Maddox. "You don't know what you're doing," Elias said softly. Not a warning, a statement of fact. "I do," Maddox shouted, desperation spilling into the word. "You'll respect me." The word came out jagged, brittle, as though even he didn't believe it. Elias exhaled, slow, deliberate. And then, in a movement faster than anyone could process, the legend revealed itself. He dropped his cane to the side. His left arm shot out, knocking the gun from Maddox's grip with a precision trained over decades. Maddox's fingers twitched uselessly as the weapon clattered to the ground. With a single pivot of his hips, Elias twisted Maddox's arm behind his back, forcing him face down into the leaves. His knee pressed into Maddox's shoulder. Not enough to break, but enough to make the boy gasp. Time returned, but the other cadets couldn't move. The terror in their faces was a mirror of every rookie who had ever seen a master at work. "You need to understand something," Elias said, calm but carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "You point a weapon at someone you don't understand, someone who has lived more of life than you can imagine, and you gamble with your own survival. And in the process, you disgrace yourself and your uniform." Maddox's breathing was ragged. Humiliation, fear, and confusion mixed on his pale face. The other cadets shifted uneasily, realizing that the prank, the lesson, the show of dominance had all failed spectacularly. Elias's gaze swept over them. "You followed this boy because you were too afraid to stand up for yourselves. You allowed arrogance to guide your actions. And now, you've learned the first rule of combat. Never underestimate your enemy, especially if he's been tested by fire." He released Maddox, letting him collapse into the leaf-strewn ground. Maddox scrambled back on his hands, avoiding the old Marine's piercing eyes. Elias stood, brushing leaves from his jacket, the embodiment of quiet authority. He looked at the younger cadets who had hesitated but not interfered. "Some of you still have a chance. But only if you admit your mistakes, learn from them, and stop letting one fool lead you into danger." He didn't strike them, didn't yell. The lesson was clear, delivered with far more weight than any shouted reprimand ever could. Then, almost as quickly as the confrontation had begun, Elias turned and began walking away toward the fading light. His voice, calm but firm, echoed in the clearing. "Remember this night. Remember it well. Pride and arrogance will get you killed, long before your enemies ever do." Behind him, the cadets were silent, stunned into reflection. Maddox sat among the leaves, humiliated but alive, the first flickers of fear and respect mingling on his young face. Elias's words lingered like a shadow over the oak trees, a reminder that legends aren't just stories, they're warnings. And sometimes, warnings are the only thing standing between life and ruin. Elias didn't return to the park that night. He walked through the quiet streets of North Ridge, cane tapping lightly on cracked sidewalks, replaying every detail of the confrontation. Cole Maddox's face, the arrogance, the fear, the shock stayed with him, but Elias didn't feel victory. Not yet. By morning, the old Marine had already taken action. He walked into the office of Colonel Richard Hargrove, the Academy commander, a man he had known since his own days in uniform. Once rivals in the field, they had long since settled old scores. But Hargrove still carried the respect of men who knew true leadership. Elias placed the stolen firearm on the desk without a word. The cold metal gleamed under fluorescent lights. Hargrove's hand trembled as he picked it up, his eyes flicking between Elias and the weapon. "Where did you find this?" Hargrove asked, voice low, uneasy. "In the park," Elias said, "and 5 cadets tried to use it on me." It's time the Academy knows the full story. What followed was an investigation that spread through the Academy like wildfire. The stolen gun, Maddox's reckless behavior, the intimidation of younger cadets, everything came to light. Students who had been complicit testified, and even those who had feared speaking up found courage in Elias's presence. By week's end, the results were clear. Maddox was expelled, his leadership position stripped, his scholarships revoked. The Academy itself faced scrutiny for negligence. Even his father's attempts to intervene, lawyers, donations, influence failed. In the end, the consequences were just, measured, and undeniable. The town watched, whispering about the old Marine who had returned from retirement not for honor, not for medals, but for justice. And then a few days later, the unexpected happened. 3 of the cadets who had been present that night, shaken and guilt-ridden, approached Elias in the park. Careful not to startle him, Calaruiz and Larson stepped onto the path where he had once fed birds, eyes downcast, shoulders stiff. "Sir," Cadler began, voice barely above a whisper. "We're sorry. For everything. We didn't know, we want to learn from you." Properly, Elias studied them. He saw the remorse, the hesitation, the flicker of potential that hadn't yet been crushed by arrogance. Slowly, a small, almost imperceptible smile formed beneath his grizzled beard. "Training starts at dawn," he said. Their eyes widened. "Really?" Larson asked. "Yes," Elias replied, tapping his cane on the ground. "But understand something first. No Marine is born a legend. You earn your place by protecting those who cannot protect themselves. By standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. Not by intimidating the weak or following fools." The cadets nodded, some eyes glistening with the first hint of tears. Elias's presence, once dismissed as a harmless relic, had become a living lesson in courage, discipline, and honor. As the sun rose over North Ridge, painting the oak trees in gold, Elias watched the 3 cadets jog off toward the Academy grounds. The weight of past battles, lost comrades, and long-buried regrets seemed lighter now. For the first time in years, he felt the fire of purpose rekindle inside him. The park was no longer a grave for memories nor a hiding place for an old man forgotten by time. It had become a training ground, a place of redemption, and a reminder that even legends, even ghosts, could rise again when the world needed them most. Elias Harrow, Iron Jack, Master Gunnery Sergeant, Marine legend, retired in years but undefeated in spirit, smiled. His work was not finished, and for the first time in a long time, that thought brought him peace.